Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of Thub Wars Presents Blistered Reviews. I'm your host, Sean Cronenfeld, and this time around we're taking a look at the return of one of the great heroes of the first golden age of adventure games. I'm talking about none other than Tex Murphy, aka both the best and worst private eye post-nuclear war San Francisco has ever seen. Does the game prove that Murph still has the goods to save the day in this post-Telltale era of adventure games? Or is this one case where the past really would have been better left alone?
My name's Tex Murphy. I'm a small-time private investigator in the big city of New San Francisco. But my office isn't in the glamour districts. It's in the run-down, mutant part of the city, close to Coit Tower. A place they've been refurbishing for years, but it never seems to improve. I've cracked some pretty big cases over the years. You may even have heard of me. But I don't do much investigating anymore.
What year do you think it is? Are you serious?
Whoever did this to you could have wiped your memory entirely, but they didn't.
I'm a big fan of forgiving and forgetting. Mostly forgetting.
Do you have disturbingly realistic, vivid dreams of another era?
Whatever happened to that big, lovable moron?
If I'd asked you that 2 days ago, you would have punched me in the face.
Maybe I should punch you now. Might jog both our memories.
Nice. Classic Tex Murphy.
I don't know what kind of bastard I turned into.
It's one of the great mysteries. Tesla conducted an experiment and it nearly took out a whole chunk of New York City.
Man has created hell on Earth, and the longer man exists, the further he descends from the wisdom and discernment needed to overcome the darkness.
What's the big deal with the Tesla inventions? I mean, there must be some reason they were never made.
Nikola Tesla was a genius.
The FBI just swooped in and confiscated all his papers, and the Tesla cash just disappeared.
This is what Tesla intended.
I can't really remember why I became a PI. Maybe because I believed in its code of honor, but even a set of principles can slowly slip from your grasp. Temptations become obsessions. Each day, innocence fades, and your character weakens.
Mantis, you gotta hold it together.
I can't.
You gotta tell me where the egg is.
I'm trying.
People change. It's one of those basic truths of human existence that as time passes, your beliefs and behavior can undergo fluctuations, to the point even that if you aren't careful, it's possible to become somebody your past self might not even recognize. Maybe you're one of those lucky few who grew up to be exactly the person you wanted to be, living exactly the life you hoped for. But chances are that at some point, you've ended up going down paths you never expected to reach destinations you never imagined. And yet, that's the way of it, and you can no more prevent such occurrences than you can hope to stop time itself. All you can really do is try to make the best decisions available to you at the time, and hope that the person you become as a result is someone you can live with. But what if that wasn't the case? What if you grew into someone utterly at odds with who you once were? And what if you were then given a second chance to try again? What then? Heady stuff for the intro to the review of a nominally silly FMV throwback game, but then again, a gleeful mix of the profound and the profoundly silly has always been at the core of the Tex Murphy series, and I'm happy to report that the Tesla effect keeps this tradition alive and well. The good: story, characters, humor, FMV cutscenes, gameplay, visuals, audio. The bad: maybe too old school for some, conversation system. The ugly: When Inspector Burns Barbecue says the taste of its food will melt your face off, they are not kidding. In 2043, Private Eye Tex Murphy stepped into a cab with the would-be love of his life, Chelsea Bando, only to find himself face to face with a gun. It would be the last thing he would see before everything went black. In 2050, Private Eye Tex Murphy would wake up in his office with a nasty head wound, marks on his arm from some kind of injection, a wrecked apartment filled with signs of a massive struggle, and all of his memories of the 7 years since that fateful taxi ride gone. As Tex tries to get to grips with his situation, he quickly discovers that in the intervening time, Chelsea has been declared dead, and Tex himself has ended up going down a dark and dangerous road in his search for answers. The Tex Murphy of 2050, it seems, had become a man prepared to do anything and break any law for the right price, having thrown away both his goofy good nature and his basic human decency along the way. Now it's up to the Tex Murphy of 2043 to clean up the mess his other self left behind, as he tries to get to the bottom of what's become of his life. It's a quest that will lead him into the middle of a dark and dangerous conspiracy surrounding the last lost inventions of one Nikola Tesla, and one that could have dire implications for both Tex and the world. As story setups go, Tesla Effect features one ripe with potential that also has the added bonus of addressing what could have otherwise been the glaring elephant in the room. Namely that it's been a whopping 16 years since the last Tex Murphy game was released. This is important because Tesla Effect continues the series' famous use of full-motion video for its cutscenes, and also brings back a number of familiar actors to reprise their roles. Chief among these is, of course, series creator Chris Jones, who as always plays the role of Tex, and who has rather noticeably aged in the interim between the last Tex Murphy game, Overseer, and this one. Nor could the series just pick up like nothing happened, since Overseer also ended on the aforementioned cliffhanger of Tex being shot while on a date with his lady love. Considering fans, including myself, have been waiting for nearly 2 decades for the resolution to Overseer's ending, it behooved Jones to finally hand out some much-needed closure, and thankfully that's exactly what he does over the course of Tesla Effect. Tex's amnesia not only makes for a very elegant way to address the aging time gap issue, but also helps give newcomers to the series an entry point into the story as well. Now, I freely admit I'm a big Tex Murphy fan, going all the way back to the series' pre-FMV days, but I genuinely believe that Tesla Effect is accessible enough to be enjoyed by diehards and newbies alike. This is thanks in large part to the game's strong writing, which uses a variety of methods to fill in the gaps without turning things into just another boring exposition dump. Instead, TE features a wide variety of humor, including plenty of slapstick and wordplay, mixed with a legitimately dramatic plot involving genetic experimentation, memory manipulation, mad cults, and even reincarnation, and all thrown together to make for one epic stew of a story. In short, it's classic Tex Murphy at its best. And even better, the game also sees the return of branching storylines and multiple endings last used in the series' arguable high point, the Pandora Directive, with Tesla Effect including 5 different potential endings for players to unlock. Indeed, from its top to its bottom, Tesla Effect is unapologetic in its decision to stay true to the past Tex Murphy titles, and the lack of concessions for a newer generation of gamer ends up being both a strength and weakness. On the one hand, the general gameplay of the Tex Murphy series really didn't need much updating when one takes into account that its mixture of first-person exploration and puzzle-solving remains as relevant as ever. The former will instantly feel familiar to fans of such titles as Amnesia and Outlast, especially during the more horror-tinged and stealth-driven sequences that have long been a series staple. Meanwhile, the various minigame-like logic puzzles will feel instantly familiar to fans of games like the Professor Layton titles, while the traditional adventure game inventory and environment manipulation helps tie things together and round out TE's overall gameplay. That's the good side of Tesla Effect, remaining true to the gameplay formula of its predecessors, but the bad side chiefly comes in the way the game handles dialogue trees. Again, as is series tradition, players do not choose from specific dialogue choices when engaged in conversations, but instead must select from vague descriptions that can be difficult at best to parse and understand. And considering how conversation choices are one of the chief ways that players determine the ending they'll receive, this can be rather problematic at times. Frankly, this approach was annoying even back in the day, and it's one area that the developers really should have taken some time to update accordingly. BioWare, for example, has demonstrated a far more effective take on this idea, and this is one time the original could have been better served by following its descendants' example. TE's dialogue system is not a game-killing issue by any means, but it is an annoyance, and a potential barrier for a game whose adherence to an old-fashioned formula might have been off-putting enough to some to begin with. Along this line, your reactions to the production values of Tesla Effect will likely depend on your willingness to embrace the limitations of what is ultimately an indie game with a budget in the medium to low range. In point of fact, TE is probably the best-looking Tex Murphy game ever released, but then again, we're talking about a series whose last entry hit shelves in 1998, so in and of itself, that's not the most impressive accomplishment ever. For what it is, Tesla Effect is a decent-looking game, but it's not likely to win any awards for best graphics come the end of the year either. The game's FMV sequences are very clearly all green screen affairs, while its 3D environments rely more on style and atmosphere than anything else. The few times actual other human characters are encountered in the game outside of the cutscenes are probably when the game's visuals are at their weakest, but like many a recent retro throwback, it's just something you're either prepared to go along with or not. Similarly, some of the performances in the FMV cutscenes are on the fairly weak side, the chief detective who you'll interact with several times being among the most notable of these. But overall, it's a good to great cast with actors who do what they need to do to keep the story humming along. And as always, Chris Jones anchors the game admirably, with his ability to switch between being funny and serious at a dime as the plot demands it. It's hard to say at this point whether or not Tesla Effect will end up being the last Tex Murphy game ever made, but should that be the case, this would be a much stronger note for the series to go out on than the last game. After all, 16 years is a very long time to wait for the resolution to a cliffhanger, but TE manages to be good enough to just about make it all worthwhile. As for non-Tex Murphy fans, I can say that if you don't enjoy adventure games in general, I'm not sure this is the title that will win you over. On the other hand, if you're a younger gamer or simply someone not familiar with Tex in the gang, but who nonetheless has enjoyed more modern takes on the genre, such as Phoenix Wright or the various Telltale games, then by all means consider giving Tesla Effect a try. The game can be a bit cheesy at times, but that is as much by design as anything else, and just part of the charm of a series that has always been unafraid to go its own way. Overall, Tesla Effect, a Tex Murphy adventure, is a worthy continuation of a long-dormant series, and if nothing else, it proves that there's still indeed plenty of life left in good old Tex. Score, 8 out of 10. Awesome. Recommendation, try it out.